To begin, I would like to welcome everyone to the Care Providers 2018 series of webinars. This is the first in our series focused on risk management. Today, we are excited to introduce Aaron Lundberg, President and CEO of Praesidium. Leader in abuse prevention, Praesidium continues to remain a valued partner of NSM Insurance Group and the Care Providers program. We believe that with partners like Praesidium, we'll stay on the front edge of both education, prevention, and abuse of molestation. Without further delay, I would like to introduce Aaron Lundberg.
Well, good afternoon, everybody, and it's a pleasure to be speaking with you. I'm going to provide an overview over the next 45 minutes of who Praesidium is, so you have a better idea of our partnership, talk a little bit about the risks that we manage, the risk of abuse prevention, and more specifically spend time on the resources that your clients have available to them through their coverage with care providers. And so I'm going to go ahead and start off by talking a little bit about Praesidium and get my screen up here, and providing a context to the services that we provide so you have some background in regards to how we manage this risk and how that relates to services that can be provided to your clients. And so Praesidium is a risk management company in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, but we work internationally. And we only manage the very specific risk of a child or vulnerable adult from being abused, whether that's physical abuse or sexual abuse, within an organization. And so we have focused solely on this risk for 26 years now. And we, over the years, have provided clients with a variety of resources and services that they can use to help protect the clientele that they serve, protect the staff and volunteers or foster parents and mentors who serve them, as well as the organization itself from any kind of reputational risk or litigation. The way we got started was our founder, a psychologist by the name of Dr. Richard Dangle, was on the board of a large youth-serving organization in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, and they had a horrible molestation of a young boy within their program by a volunteer. And because he was a child psychologist and because he had treated sexual abuse victims for many years, they went to him and basically asked him to help them determine how it happens. They knew all too well what occurred, so they didn't need any assistance there, but they were frightened that if they didn't understand what could cause this type of incident within their institution, that it could happen again next week, next year, whatever it may be, and they never wanted to go through that situation again. And so at that time, there was a fair deal known in regards to intrafamilial abuse, but what he found pretty quickly was that there was very little known in regards to extrafamilial abuse, so abuse within an organization. And so he did some research, and he found some troubling statistics, as you see here on the screen. These are current day statistics, not what was found 25 years ago, but they're pretty close to what was then. And he found that essentially 1 in 4 girls and 1 in 7 boys will be sexually abused before they turn the age of 18. And a fairly recent research study that has come out that just looked at abuse within the school system by a researcher by the name of Cheryl Shankshaft did a meta-analysis of all abuse cases over about a 30-year period and determined that about 10% of school children will be abused before they graduate high school. And that's not abuse by another peer, that's solely abuse by another adult within that school. So that could be a principal, a teacher, a coach, a janitor, whoever it may be, a volunteer working within that school. What he also learned fairly quickly was that it's not just adults abusing other youth, it's youth abusing other youth or vulnerable adults abusing other vulnerable adults. And so as you see here, a large percentage of molestations are actually committed by juveniles. And then last but not least, he determined, or the research determined, that while those statistics are troubling, the vast majority of abuse does not go reported. And so some estimates are that close to 80% of abuse does not go reported. And so that could be not reported by either the child or vulnerable adult who is suffering the abuse, or by other individuals who may witness either red flag behaviors within an adult or a child's interactions, as well as suspected abuse. And so there's a lot of barriers to reporting this type of incident. And so he learned a lot more about the problem. To date, what we have seen is that while organizations' protections in regards to this risk has decreased, the community and legal expectations have increased. And so what you see here, if you look at the first 4 bullets essentially, is that, as you all know and have heard, over the last probably 8 or 9 years, and maybe even more than that when we think about some of the older cases that have come out, this has been a big topic in the news. And so it seems like every year there's a new scandal with a new youth-serving organization that gets a lot of publicity. A lot of it rightfully so, because a lot of significant mistakes were made. And so this has raised in everybody's consciousness that this is a risk and it needs to be managed. We found that when we first started working with clients 25 years ago, they would oftentimes say, hey, we want to work with you, but we don't want anyone to know that we're working with you, because then people will feel like that we have a problem here. Well, now it's just the reverse. Now we have our clients saying we want to work with you, and then we want to post all on our website, and we want to tell our parents that we have our staff go through your training, we're accredited by you, because our parents and our board of directors and other stakeholders are more aware of this now, and they're starting to ask questions. And so we really seen the tide change with that. As you all have also heard, there's been a lot of legislation over the years in regards to increased requirements of youth-serving organizations. And so in the state of Texas, if you're a camp, you have to go through certain training. In a lot of different states, there's a lot of requirements for background check screening. And then along with that, as I mentioned, there are decreased protections. And so there's ongoing challenges to the statute of limitations. And so in many states, the courts have opened up a window that allows any victim to file a lawsuit, regardless of how long ago it happened. And then they get their lawsuits in, and that window may close. Other states, they have rolled back the statute of limitations, where it used to be 5 years after a 21st birthday. Now it's 10 or 15 or whatever it may be. And then we're also seeing decreased immunity. We're seeing that both in the private and public sectors. And so we are seeing that this is a risk that is becoming maybe not more significant in frequency. I think it's been happening for quite some time, but we're hearing about it now because there's attorneys, there's parents who are more sophisticated and holding organizations more and more accountable. And so that's a lot about the problem. And we could go on in regards to that, but what that doesn't do is it doesn't really help us in terms of how we manage this risk. And so when our founder started Praesidium, he was convinced that this was not a natural disaster. This wasn't a risk that all we can do is respond really well to, but we can't prevent. And so what we have seen is some organizations treat this like a natural disaster. And so what they do is they will train all of their staff on things like what to do when they spot abuse, essentially that you're a mandated reporter, and then when you see the signs of abuse, you need to report to the authorities, report to the administrators, and that's important. We want to make sure we do that because that decreases the effects of that abuse to the victim, and that decreases the effects of that incident to the organization. And so that's not an insignificant thing. However, that does nothing to prevent these cases from occurring. And so what he did at the time is he gathered up to 400 cases of abuse, and he used a methodology called root cause analysis and he analyzed those cases and found a couple different things. One is there weren't 400 reasons why those cases were happening, because if there were 400 reasons to 400 cases, it would be an unpreventable risk. It'd be a random occurrence. But unfortunately, there was not a singular cause. There wasn't a single that he could go back to that original organization that he was on the board for and say, okay, all we have to do is criminal background checks, and we'll never have another incident because we've screened out all the offenders. Or all that we have to do is train people, or all that we have to do is have a policy about responding, or we have to supervise really well. And so what he found instead was, while there wasn't 400 reasons and there wasn't a silver bullet, there was 8 root causes. And so what you see in front of you is the Praesidium safety equation, and these are the 8 root causes that he found then, and that we continue to find today after a review of well over 4,000 cases of abuse within organizations, using that same methodology, that contribute or prevent incidents of abuse. And so these are the 8 different areas that when we're working with an organization, we help them manage. At the end of the day, we want an organization to get 100 theoretical safety points to create a safe environment. However, based on what they do and how they do it, they typically can't get the maximum number of points in every single box to get to that 100. That based on what they do, they may inherently lose some points in different operations, and so they have to make up points in other operations to still get to that 100. So, for example, if you run a mentoring program, you automatically lose points in monitoring and supervision, because the whole nature of mentoring is you have a lone adult with a lone child within the community, and to change that would be changing the nature of mentoring. And so a mentoring organization like Big Brothers Big Sisters loses points in monitoring and supervision, and so they still have to get to that 100 points, and so they have to make up points in, for example, like screening and selection. And so a mentoring organization will screen to a lot higher standard their mentors than maybe a child care situation, where those child care workers theoretically are always working in front of other adults and other children. And so child care organizations won't do a home study, won't go into the individual's home and do a comprehensive interview of that sort. They won't do up to 6 references or whatever it may be for that, and that's okay. That would still meet industry standards. A mentoring organization might also increase points in consumer participation. That's how do we educate the kids themselves or the vulnerable adults and their parents on self-protection and the rules of the mentors. And so you get the picture of how this system works. And so this is a paradigm that we use to evaluate every organization. I'll talk a little bit more about that here in a little bit. But this is also the paradigm that we use to provide services to your clients. And so we provide policy and procedure review. We provide services under how to screen individuals. We provide services on how to train and so forth. And so as we talk about the services that Praesidium provides that your clients have available to them, you will see that most of them will fit, well, all of them actually, will fit in one of these boxes or multiple boxes to help them manage this risk. And as an aside, which I forgot to mention in the beginning, I will leave time for questions. And so if you do have questions as we're going, if you want to type those in the chat function, go ahead and start typing those in as we're talking, and then I'll address those at the end. So when we're working with an organization, we want to get them to a place of commitment. And so there are a lot of challenges for managing this risk. And when you're working with your clients, you will likely be able to put them in one of 3 areas. One is an area of complacency. And so these types of clients oftentimes have an attitude of, well, we've never had an incident. We know everybody here. And so we don't have to do all the stuff we're saying, and so we must be okay. And so they have few standardized policies and procedures. They have done very little introspection in terms of what can be done differently, and they really count on the fact that because they've had past success, that will keep them safe within the future. We know that's not to be the case. This is a low frequency yet high effect event, and so fortunately these cases don't happen every day within an organization. But because of that, we can get really lax in our procedures and our policies, because over time we don't have an incident, and so we figure like, well, we don't need to do all this hard work anyways, and so we stop doing those things. And then as time goes on, every single policy or procedure that we either don't put in place or we don't follow increases the likelihood slightly that we're going to have an incident, and then something bad does happen. And then all of a sudden everyone realizes we need to be committed to this. And so we really want to move these organizations from complacency, and the next step is into a compliance mindset. A compliance mindset is better, but it's still not where we want them to get to. And so compliance mindsets are organizations who do just what they have to do, really to check a box. And so now you can identify a client who's in a compliance mindset when they say like, oh, don't worry, we manage this risk because we do criminal background checks, or we adhere to licensing requirements, or we train all of our staff once they're hired. And so all of that stuff, again, is good, and it should be done. But in and of itself, just training staff one time or just doing background checks is helpful, but it doesn't do everything they can, and in some cases it does very little in terms of managing this risk. It takes more of a comprehensive effort, and it takes more of the commitment that we're talking about. And so we will talk about here in the next section services that certainly help them become in compliance. And so when there's an incident, there is 4 different ways a plaintiff's attorney is going to try to find your organization's liable. And that's no small thing, because we want to protect these organizations from any financial damages so that they can continue on their mission. Those 4 ways are negligent screening and selection. And so that falls into 2 categories. The first is, did they do the right kind of background checks? We'll talk about that in a second. And the second is, did they do reference checks? Did they call past employers? We recommend personal references, and to try to find if there's any knowable information about this applicant that could come out later, that was easily found by a phone call, by a form that was sent, or whatever it may be, that if there is a case, that if they do any backtracking, that someone else might find. And so we will talk about some services that help them manage that. The second piece is negligent training. And so does the organization provide ongoing training to staff, volunteers, youth, that is not just reactive, and so goes beyond the mandated reporting. We'll show that we do have a course for that, but also it's preventative in nature. And so if there's a case, what the plaintiff's attorney will do, will get an expert who knows about offenders or youth offenders, and they will describe how a typical offender operates. And then they'll say to the expert, well, when you saw how this offender operates, were there red flags that should have been reported that people didn't report? And the offender will say, well, as a matter of fact, these are the 5 things that came out. And then they'll say, well, did these staff have training to identify those 5 things? And then the expert will look at that curricula and say, no, their training did not match that. And so that would be a form of negligent training. The third is negligent supervision. And so this gets at what kind of procedures are in place to manage high-risk activities. This is particularly important in youth-to-youth or client-to-client abuse, and how those clients are managed and supervised. And the last is negligent retention. And so once red flags that don't raise the level of abuse or suspected abuse get identified, what kind of procedures and training is in place so that they fulfill their mandated reporting requirements, and they remove the alleged offender, whether that's a youth or another adult, as quickly as possible. And so we do want to make sure that those organizations do have procedures in place, because, again, that is this box, and it helps protect them. But then we also want to make sure that they're doing everything they can to actually prevent these types of incidents, and they can get into this commitment area. So that's the broad overview. If there are any follow-up questions in regards to the dynamics of this risk and how it happens in organizations, type in your questions, or I'll be available after this by email or phone, and I'll be happy to answer anyone's questions. But I do want to move on to services that we provide. that are either at no cost to your clients or at a discounted rate to your clients. And so I'll make a distinction between those as we walk through these for these. And so what I'll say broadly speaking is we have our services fall into two buckets. One are preventative services. So they're all services designed to prevent these incidents from occurring. Because as I mentioned, the preventable risk, with that analysis, about 80% of those cases, or maybe even 85% of those cases, could have been prevented one way or another. Then the second bucket is reactive services. And so once there's been an incident, what can be done to help that organization respond and mitigate, reduce the consequences to the alleged victim, to the alleged offender in some circumstances, as well as the organization. And so oftentimes when we see our lawsuits occur, it's not because of the actual incident. The lawsuit happens because of the response to that incident. And so organizations, when they have these bad incidents happen, they're not always prepared to respond because they don't respond to these types of incidents every day, thank goodness. And so if they don't have the correct either training or policies or procedures, we see that they oftentimes get defensive. They put up walls. They get bad advice oftentimes from sometimes attorneys, from sometimes they aren't getting advice, they're making decisions on their own. And the perception is that they're being deceptive, they are not being transparent, and they're not being compassionate. And what we have found is that if organizations respond in just the opposite way, and so they act as compassionate as possible, they are as transparent as possible, and they act with confidence, that not only can they help their organizations, but they can actually help the alleged victims and their families cope, and the less likelihood of any kind of lawsuit or media exposure. And so we provide a lot of services that I'll talk about in a minute for their insureds. And so first, I'm going to start with training that we offer. Now, what I'll kind of toggle back and forth with is some of your clients are insured by AIG Insurance, and some of them are insured by Arch. And so with our relationship with AIG, and I have a slide that summarizes this, they get 3 core services at no cost to them. And so it's covered by AIG. And this is the first one. And so this is our online training system. It's called Armatus. Armatus is Latin. It means learn to protect. And this system is a very, very robust online learning system, but it's really more than that. And so we have close to 100 courses that are all very, very specific to either an industry or a particular topic related to abuse risk. And so what we have found over the years is you can't just have 2 or 3 courses and assume they're going to translate in every single industry and every single environment. People want to go through training that they feel like is made and relevant to them. And so we have a number of different courses that are geared towards specific industries. And so within that even, we have courses that are geared toward whether they serve children, vulnerable adults, or the elderly. And so we have very specific courses that if when you send one of your clients to us, we'll learn about what they do, and we'll say, okay, here are the different courses that are going to match the services that you provide. Some of your clients are multi-service, and so we will help them set up courses that relate to the different programs that they have. And then we have courses that are related to topics, as I mentioned. And so we have courses that are specific to managing adult to child abuse. So we talk about offenders. You see here just an example. We have a course called Meet Sam, and this talks about how offenders operate within organizations. We talk about another course about victims and warning signs we can identify in children or vulnerable adults may being abused. We have courses on each operation of our safety equation that I was describing. And so what does effective policies mean within an organization? Screening and selection. We have courses just for board members to make sure that leadership's on board. We have a course, mandated reporting, which is a really important course for all of your clients. This is both a national relevance nationally in terms of any organization and their mandated reporting requirements, but more importantly, it's geared towards each of their states. And so every state has different mandated reporting requirements. And so if you have a client who is in Louisiana, they'll go through this and they'll say, what state are you from? They'll click Louisiana, and they'll be able to see their mandated reporting requirements in Louisiana. Same thing with Texas, same thing in California, same thing anywhere. And so it's very specific to them. And so they have all of these, and if they're with AIG, this is at no cost to them. In addition to the online training that's housed, we also have what we call mini-minders, as well as coaching playbooks and discussion guides within it. And so what we've found is that just sending someone through an online course, it only has kind of marginal effectiveness. And so we built in tools that they can use to make sure that what they learn online is relevant and really sticks to what happens in the field. And so there are action plans that the learner can fill out as they're going through, kind of a workbook that's included in every single course. There's a discussion guide that supervisors can use, and so how that works is they'll say, okay, everybody go through the mandated reporting course by this date, and then during our supervision meeting next week, we're going to debrief about it. And so there's a discussion guide that they can use that's based on those courses to make sure that the rubber really hits the road. So they can say, okay, here are, in our organization, our requirements are A, B, and C as you learn in this course, and so there's a guide with that. And then another really cool feature is what we call mini-minders. And so what we have found is that there is two concepts that we want to make sure of. Is one, just-in-time training. And so there are activities that staff and volunteers really should be trained on right before an activity occurs, not 6 months before it occurs. And so easy example is we see a lot of youth-to-youth abuse on buses during transportation, like to an event or to an activity. And so where we've seen organizations go wrong is they put everyone, a volunteer or staff, through an orientation when they become a volunteer or staff, but they don't actually do that activity for 6 months, 6 months later. And so they may have learned how to manage that bus activity. That's to sit in a certain area and take a head count or whatever it may be. However, because it took 6 months for them to actually do the activity, they forget. And so what we have developed is these mini-minders so that we don't have to do that training 6 months prior, so you can save some time on the front end during the orientation, and then instead of doing it 6 months prior, you do it a day prior. And it's a 5-minute course on how to manage transportation, or a 5-minute course on how to do overnight activities, or fill in the blank, so that they're getting the relevant content at the relevant time. And then the other type of mini-minder we have are learning reinforcers or course reinforcers. And so what we found is this dynamic of, you know, you send someone through a training and their awareness jumps up really high, and over time that awareness drops, as I mentioned, because there's no incident and they get busy. And so each of our courses has many booster courses set up so that in 3 months after they take the original course, you can send a mini reinforcer to them, and they go through a 5-minute course that reinforces some important content. So it kind of floats the learning. It keeps the information relevant. And again, with AIG, ensures that all of this is included with that. So the next service that we provide that falls into the reactive bucket that we talked about is consultation and crisis management. And so this is also at no charge to AIG at any time. So as I mentioned, we've reviewed over 4,000 cases to date. We receive those incidents in 2 different ways. One is just through ongoing work with our clients. So when we do risk assessments and accreditation, we review those incidents and do root cause analysis. The other is we have a helpline service and a consultation service. And so we have very large organizations where all of their cases flow through our office. And so Boys and Girls Club of America, YMCA of the USA, Presbyterian Church of the USA, and then we have small to mid-sized independent organizations where if they have an incident, they call us. We have safety analysts who are all master's level or above. We have social workers, we have psychologists, we have a number of attorneys on staff, and they staff this helpline 24/7. And when an incident comes in, they help provide consultation to that organization on how to respond, so that they're doing so in, as I mentioned earlier, in a way that mitigates that case as much as possible. And so if your client has an incident, they can call us, and then we're on call, and we can help them manage these cases the best, any way they would like us to help us manage it. And so we do everything from help them manage the media, help them to get out communication to the parents, to any other stakeholders, how to provide victims assistance coordination, how to convene a crisis management team and keep the board in the loop, really kind of from A to Z. The other type of consultation that your insureds can receive is just general consultation. And so if they're looking to train their staff, they're looking to develop a policy, if they're interviewing an applicant and some kind of red flags popped up, they want to run it by us, they call us and just kind of pick our brains. And so we can just provide technical assistance in any way that we can. And then not the last service, but the last service that AIG insureds receive at no cost is a tip of the month. And actually, I'll broaden that out a little bit. This is for all of your insurers, whether it's Arch or AIG. And so we do a monthly subscription for our clients and your clients, where every month we focus on a new topic, and we provide very useful content in a variety of areas. So sometimes we've done it on social media, sometimes we've done it on crisis management, sometimes we've done it on best practices of training. And so it's great information for administrators, but then it's also great information for them to use with their staff to kind of float that learning, as we were talking about. Another good kind of course reinforcer. It helps keep the content relevant, and it reminds the organizations that this is a risk they manage, and it provides really, really useful content that they can use. And so any of your clients can subscribe to that, as well as yourself, and receive these tips and the email subscription. The next service that we offer is background screening. And so this is not a free service for AIG or Arch, but we have discounted this service for both carriers. And so if any of your clients, well, all of your clients are probably using background checks one way or another, hopefully. But if they want to either start using background checks or compare their current vendor with ours, we provide the full suite of background screening, everything from county, national sex offender registry checks, employment verifications, credit checks, international checks, drug screening, and so forth. And then, as I mentioned, we have discounted rates. What's important to know with background screening is that not all background checks are created equal. And so it's really important that organizations do the right type of background check, so they're not found to be negligent screening an applicant. And so oftentimes organizations, in particular organizations who are licensed and there's licensing requirements, fall into a trap of only doing what's required by that licensing agency, and that may not be necessarily best practice. And so, for example, in Texas, there are some organizations who are licensed, and Texas only requires them to do a state-based check, not a check within Louisiana or Arkansas or Oklahoma or New Mexico, anywhere else you could easily have applicants lived in the past, or anywhere else for that matter. And so if that's all that you're doing, and the applicant has only lived in Texas for a year, but has lived in Louisiana for the last 15 years, and there's a criminal conviction in Louisiana, that will not have been found within a Texas check. And so you really want to make sure that they're doing the right check for the right type of applicant. And so that's another area we can provide consultation on, regardless if they use us for criminal background screening or not. We can learn a little bit more about them and provide consultation on what's the best type of check that they can do. What are you going to get the most bang for your buck in terms of not making sure that it's not cost prohibitive, but you're doing both a wide check And so a multinational, national check, as well as a deep check, which is more of a county-based check. And there's pros and cons of kind of how to do those as well. And some other services that are discounted through AIG and ARCH that your clients have access to. And so we do kind of 3 different services to help organizations take a more comprehensive approach, wrap their arms around this risk using our safety equation. So the first is an online self-assessment called Know Your Score. And so we developed this assessment probably going on about 10 years now, where an organization can go online and conduct an assessment of their operations in each of our 8 operations of the safety equation. And so they'll go to the policy section, and they will ask questions like, do you have a policy that defines appropriate and inappropriate physical affection with a client? Do you have a policy that defines appropriate and inappropriate electronic communication, like texting or emailing with a client? And then it'll ask them different questions in training or supervision. And at the end of the assessment, they will get a score per operation and an overall score. But then the best part of the assessment is anywhere that they did not give themselves full credit, they will get a resource to fix the gap. And so it's as much as an assessment as it is a resource delivery tool. And so if they say, oh no, we don't have a policy that defines appropriate and inappropriate electronic communication with a staff and a client, then they will get a sample policy from us that they can either use outright or revise. Or if they don't have behaviorally based interview questions that assess abuse risk, they'll get those questions. And so this tool is a wonderful resource, not just to assess their program, but then to get really good resources to close any of the gaps. We've had well over 2,000 clients use it. Every single YMCA in the United States has gone through this process or is in the process of going through online self-assessment. We've used it with social service agencies, used it with schools, we used it with churches, and so it allowed us to get a really good baseline of where organizations are at, and we've been able to benchmark kind of the average score. And so the other thing this will provide an organization is a norm. And so they'll go through it and they'll see that their score is a 74% or whatever it may be, and they'll see how that they rate against their peers and against every organization at large, so they can kind of see kind of where they're at and where their improvement really needs to go. And they can do that by operation, they can do it overall. So it's a really good tool that they have available to them. The next is an on-site management systems review. This is where our team actually goes out to an organization and we interview leadership. And we interview people who at usually a higher level, so it could be a program director, CEO, risk manager, HR director, and we learn at a systems level what an organization has in place within the safety equation, and we make high-level recommendations, system-wide recommendations. What we don't do is we don't go on the ground. We don't go out to programs. Usually, we don't interview staff. We don't kind of see if they have a policy. Or is it actually followed on the ground? But we certainly will look if they have the policy. And so it's a good mid-level to high-level review. And then the last type of review, which is the most comprehensive review, is an on-site risk assessment. And so that's where we go out to an organization and we do the management systems review. We look at policies, we look at their incidents, we do architectural inspection, and then we interview everyone from the direct care staff to board members. And we compare their practices to our best practice standards in the safety equation, and they receive a very comprehensive report. Once the recommendations are in place, an organization is eligible to be accredited by us, and that accreditation is good for 3 years. We come out every year, do like spot checks, if you will, to make sure that what they say is in place, and just provide ongoing consultation. And then they can advertise to insurance carriers, to their board, to parents, to other stakeholders, licensing reps, that they meet the highest standards in abuse prevention. And then a couple of other services that I won't go into detail is, one, we do lots of on-site training. And so we can go out and train board of directors, leadership, direct care staff on general abuse prevention, as well as specific topics like how to screen out offenders, how to respond really well to incidents, and so on and so forth. And then the other one is a policy analysis. And so what that does is an organization will essentially email us their policies. We do a pretty comprehensive analysis, and we provide them a recommendation on just those policies, and we provide any sample policies that may be missing. And so we do this with a lot of insureds, and so we do this on an ongoing basis. Again, it's not something that is on the onset at no charge, but it's either at a discounted rate, or it can be approved it can be approved by AIG, and that sometimes they'll pay for those for particular insureds. And so, as a summary for AIG Complementary Services, they receive the Armadas online training, the helpline, the tip of the month. And as I mentioned, if your insureds are interested in other services and want to see if AIG will pay, oftentimes they will. It just has to be approved by them. And so you let us know what services those might be, and then we go to AIG, and then they say yes or no. In regards to Arch, they receive all of those services that I was talking about at a discounted rate. However, as we stand now, none of them are offered at no cost, but we are currently in conversations with them to look to develop a formal partnership with them. And so stay tuned. There is a chance that further down the road, there will be some services offered at no cost like at AIG, and when and if that happens, we will let you know. So that is the overview for today. I will open it up to see if there are any questions based on kind of what we do or how abuse happens, or some of the services that are available to your clients. And I'm also going to leave up here, as you see, my contact information. If there are any follow-up questions, you can email me or call me. Also, you see here is Casey's contact information. And so if you have any questions for her in regards to the coverage or in regards to our partnership, her contact information is here as well. As I mentioned, we can sign you up for the tip of the month if you would like to receive that. Please let us know. I do not see any questions at this time, and so thank you very much.
Hey, Aaron. I'm going to interrupt you for a quick second. I have a couple questions on my end that came through while you're speaking, so I'll just run through them very quickly. So first, we had a couple people would like to offer their services to their care providers' clients, AIG. What is the first step that they need to take in order to do so?
Go ahead and contact me directly, and what we will do on our end is learn who the insured is, and then we have a very quick process that we do on our end to confirm with AIG, and then if this is standard services that they would like to take advantage of, meaning the online training, tip of the month, or consultation, we will get that going. We have a really quick turnaround. If it's services that we need approval for, then we'll ask for that approval and get back. And so the short answer to that is simply email or call me, and then we'll get that started.
Okay. Somebody asked a similar question. How do they access these tools? Are they able to test them on their end? Are they able to go through walkthroughs with their clients to kind of educate them on what Praesidium has to offer, or should they just directly get in touch with you?
Yeah, so a couple things that we can do is, one, we will be emailing out a brochure that will summarize, a pamphlet that will summarize these services so that you have something to bring to your clients and show them and talk through with them. We can also, if you would like, you can contact me and I can set you up with some temporary access to, like, for example, the online training, and so that you can go through it and get a flavor for it. If your clients would like to, that same type of access to go through and see a sample of the online training, please let us know, and we will give them temporary access from our end. And so we can definitely do that. If there's more information that you would like to have in regards to know your score online assessment, we can do demos of that as well. Please let us know. We'd be happy to set up a call with you and your client and do a demo for all of you. And then if there's just more information that they would like to know about a service, you can call us and we can set up a conference call with you and them, and we can talk in more detail about any of the services that we discussed today.
Awesome. Two more. Jim Greaves is asking if you can provide more details on your crisis management.
Sure. And so we have a lot of experience working with very high-profile clients as well as very small clients when these incidents occur. And so the first thing that we do when we get a call in is we triage the immediate concern. And so that usually means, have we called the authorities? Have we notified everybody who needs to be notified? So sometimes that's as simple as, have we told the alleged victim's parents? Do they know? Have we notified staff so that if they get a call from the media that they know what to say? And so we do the immediate triage. And then what we do is, and of course it's at the request of the client, but we encourage them to set up a small committee who are going to be decision makers on their end. Usually it's someone from the board, usually it's the CEO, and maybe one or two other people. And we get on and we talking about the ongoing management. So we talk about how do we, if and how we let our community know. And so will we send out parent letters? Do we need to send out letters to other stakeholders, funders, board of directors, whatever it may be? Do we need to develop a press release or a holding statement in case the press contacts us? And then the third layer of this is, do we need to reach out to alleged victims or suspected victims? Do we need to identify if there is other people who may have been abused, and how does that play into it? And so we help on the communication and strategy end, and then we help on the outreach to the victim. So it's become very standard practice now for the organizations when they have an incident to offer free support services to the victims. And so, for example, Penn State offered free counseling to all of the Sandusky victims. All of those victims flowed through our office. And so what organizations want to make sure they do is there's no barrier for those victims to access those services, meaning it could be perceived that they have to go to the organization that they're mad at to ask for counseling, that may be a barrier. And so we are essentially act as a third-party administrator of those services. And so we have probably right now 7 active clients where we're doing this, and at any given time that's about where we're at, where we will, victims will reach out to us or we reach out to the victims. We find out if they want counseling services. We will either help them pay a counselor on their end, or they'll already have one. And then all of the financial and contracting will flow through us. And so we'll build a provider. The provider we'll pay the provider, I should say. They bill us, and then we in turn bill the client. And sometimes the client never knows who the victims are. Sometimes they do. It just depends on the arrangement. But it makes sure that those victims get quick and confidential counseling services for that. And so we've been doing that more and more over the last 4 or 5 years.
Okay, awesome. And then the final question, the audience is wondering if you can provide state requirements for mandated reporting or statute of limitations, and if not, where we could find that information?
Yes, we can. I'll work with Casey to figure out how the best way to get this to you. But there is the best source of information is actually online. There's a link, and it's the most up-to-date source of mandated reporting requirements. The problem of putting documents that gets updated about 6 months because states change all the time. And so there is an online resource that we use internally to look up the state mandated reporting requirements and that you can use and you can refer your clients to. And so we can send that link out to the group so that you have that. We do not have, and I do not know of yet, the best up-to-date source for the statute of limitations. There is a document that we use. The problem is it's a document and it's a little out of date because things change very, very quickly with that. And so it's a couple years old, and so I'd be hesitant to send it out. But we have not found a centralized online source that gets updated every time there's a new statute that's put out or rolled back or whatever it may be. But we do have ways to look it up, and so if there's a state that you're looking into, if you wanted to let us know, we can look that up and find it to the best of our ability and let you guys know.
Awesome. Sounds great. Well, those are all the questions we have on our end. So we just want to thank you, Aaron, for taking the time to speak with everyone today. This webinar was recorded, so we will be sending up a follow-up email with the link included this week. So please share with your clients. And then Aaron and Casey's contact information will be on that email as well. So feel free to reach out to Aaron with any follow-up questions that you may have. But again, thank you, Aaron, for your time. And I hope everyone got something out of this. So thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody.
Have a good day, everyone.